This is the very first episode of the Barbell Notes Research Talk. I'm your host, Gergő Somodi, and today I sat down with Professor Christopher Tabor for a quick chat about the background of our research into the relation between the snatch and its assistant exercises. Hi, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Everything's going great. Thank you.
Maybe before we start, there might be a couple of people who don't know you. So would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm I'm an associate professor at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut in the United States. I'm the graduate program director for our program in exercise and sports science. And outside of school, I am a weightlifting coach. So I coach a weightlifting team at Sacred Heart and another one at a local club in Connecticut. So it's a little bit about what I do.
Nice. And how many lifters you coach at the moment?
I probably have about 15 to 20 lifters in total.
Very nice. And what are their levels at the moment?
I have everyone from a youth athlete, she's 12, all the way up to master's athlete who is 64 years old. So I've got a wide range of athletes, and then I have some national level males and females at the senior level.
Nice. So we've been working together for a while, and I remember when I first talked to you about the idea of getting into research on the lifting ratios in the snatch. You seem to like it. So could you just give a gist of what makes it interesting from an exercise science perspective?
Yeah. So in some of the research, early research that was done, they examined the correlation of certain lifts together. So for example, in some lifters, if your back squat is higher, is that higher back squat correlated with higher clean and jerk numbers or higher snatch numbers? And so the thought is, if you find exercises that are highly correlated, what you would hope is that if one lift trends upward, the other would follow. So these kind of associated lifts being together. And they've examined that in the literature, looking at things like the overhead press and the jerk. It's just some recent research that came out. There's earlier research on the back squat and clean and jerk and snatch numbers. And then there have been some examinations into the power versions of lifts, like a power clean or a power snatch in relation to the full versions of those lifts. So what they're examining is just these two variables. If one trends up, does the other one trend up? And it's interesting for coaches because if they know they're correlated, then that might help them in the designing of training or when they're looking for ways to develop the athletes in a better way. They're looking for proxies of these other lifts.
Right. So you only mentioned a couple of exercises, but if we really look for proxies, shouldn't we investigate all of them?
Yeah, I think you could get as many as possible. I think many people choose the squats or like a push press, a strict press, just because they're involved in everybody's training. And so there might be certain exercises that people don't do. And the back squat, front squat are good indicators of leg strength. And you need those lifts for the snatch and clean and jerk. So specifically in the clean and jerk, you got to stand up from the clean. And so leg strength is going to be associated with that, and then having enough left over of reserve strength to make the jerk. And so those lifts probably carry over more directly because they hit the same patterns that you would see in the lifts. And so if you would assuming someone's technique is good, if their back squat is high, their front squat's probably also high. They probably trend together going upwards. And so we know the front squat is involved in a clean. And so therefore measuring the back squat and front squat, they would be tied together. The farther you deviate from the technique that you're looking for, probably the less correlation there would be. So if you did something like let's say a Zercher squat or, a different form of squatting, like a safety squat or something, because the mechanics may look different, it may have a less correlation the farther you step away from the actual lift.
Right. So I was asking about including more exercises because what struck me reading through the literature on correlations is that the snatch is really only mentioned in passing, and I don't really get it why.
I think the snatch is understudied in that regard. I believe there are a few papers looking at those numbers in the snatch, but I believe the correlations are lower than the clean and jerk, and that's likely due to the body positions. You know, in the clean, it's more of a strength dominant lift, so the squats would probably carry over more. The
Right.
snatch still involving quite a bit of strength, but it's really about technique and precision and speed. So there might be other exercises that might look more like the snatch and the characteristics that you would need for that. So you might want to examine things like a power snatch, um, in regard to a full snatch or a pull. That way it's hitting the same joint angles as a snatch would be.
Right. And then talking about the power snatch, I think what's kind of like common knowledge or something that I heard it many times from coaches that it's somewhere around 80%, but the power snatch is somewhere around 80%, which is like a percentage ratio. But then when people look into the literature, then they will see that the power snatch, for example, in the research that we are about to re-examine, they say the power snatch has a correlation coefficient of 0.92. The correlation coefficient meaning the strengths of the relationship. One of the numbers moving probably will result in the other moving. So what's the difference there? So one of them is a ratio, and the other is other coefficient.
And so the theory behind the ratios is making the assumption that your technique is sufficient. If your technique is stabilized, in general, when they were looking at a wide swath of lifters, in general, the power snatch or power clean was around 80% of their full snatch. And they also looked at ratios of the clean and jerk to the back squat. There have been quite a few of them thrown out. I've heard one, whatever you can front squat for a triple, you should be able to clean and jerk.
Oh, I heard that one too.
So how much research behind it is I'm not sure, but these ratios are kind of pointing coaches in the direction of, let's say, taking the snatch for an example. If we think that the ratio that they've found is 80%, and your lifter is low on the power snatch in regards to your full snatch, so let's say you can only power snatch 70%, then maybe your time should be dedicated to working on the characteristics of the power snatch to bring that up. So elevating the bar
Right.
to a higher height. Maybe we're not good at displacing the bar vertically, and that's why we can't get under a power snatch. It's not higher. And so by working that quality, it may, yes, bring up the power snatch, but it might also change some of the dynamics in the full snatch as well. Then you could look at another lifter whose power snatch is, let's say, 85 or 90% of the full snatch. Well, what that could indicate for a coach is, hey, you're pulling the bar very high, but there's something lacking in the drop under, in the turnover, allowing you to drop underneath the weight and meet it. So we need to focus on the technique of the full snatch, because it appears that we have the strength and the displacement to pull the bar high enough, but there's something in the fixation underneath the bar that's lacking. So maybe we're lacking speed, or we're lacking the timing and coordination. So those ratios are going to give a coach an idea of where to put the training demands if we're assuming those ratios carry over. Same thing with the clean, in those related exercises.
Thanks, Chris. I think it should be clear now what we are after. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I think it all comes down to making sure that technique is consistent when you collect the data. You want to make sure that technique is starting to stabilize where there's very few errors or
And then the
one
correlations
consistent
can
error.
help you there
Correct.
to
And
if
then,
they are indeed the correlations as we know them.
yep. And then you want to explore which exercises are the most highly correlated. And so the farther you get away from the competition lifts, so that would be a 1RM, snatch or clean and jerk in competition settings, probably the less it's going to carry over. So we would want to make sure that they're pretty close together in terms of execution. And as long as you have a high correlation, then you could start to explore the ratios. And then the
Right.
last thing I would say is you do need to be careful where the correlations don't always assume that it's going to cause one to go up. So in the case
Right.
of the snatching from before, we can show they're correlated, but it doesn't necessarily mean that putting all the effort into one will necessarily make the other one go up.
Right. So if you are a coach or an athlete and you are interested in the correlations and ratios between the snatch and its assistant exercises, please go to our website at www.barbellnotes.com/research, fill out our form. It really just takes 2 minutes. Then we make sure to send you the findings once the research is completed. Thank you for your time, Chris. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.